There was a rotten banana in the break room again. Third day in a row. Nobody throws it out. They just let it fester. That's how this place works. People pretend they don't see the mess if it isn't theirs. I should have known then. Because 37 minutes later, a different kind of mess walked through the glass doors. In heels. Smiling. Holding a folder like she hadn't lit my life on fire, and walked away whistling. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We just finished interviewing a guy named Benton. Yes, Benton, who spent 10 whole minutes explaining why his biggest strength was team-based coffee delegation. My assistant cracked a joke. I laughed too hard. I always do when I'm nervous, and then I flipped over the next resume in the stack, and my throat closed. Emmeline Reese. I don't know if you've ever seen a ghost in daylight, but I did, right there on crisp white paper. Her name printed in bold, followed by a fresh LinkedIn link, a suspiciously vague 5-year employment gap, and a line that said she was eager to return to structured work. Yeah, I bet she was. I didn't say anything to the team, just stared at the resume for way too long. My pen shook. My stomach did this weird drop, like a roller coaster had pulled the brakes too hard. Was this real? Why would she come here? Why now? And then I realized the most mind-bending part of all. She had no idea this company was mine now. When we met, I worked in a cubicle with a sticky chair and a password taped under my keyboard. Now, I ran the department. My name was on the new hire paperwork, and she was walking in here to impress a panel, never knowing I'd be sitting at the head of the table. I should have excused myself. I should have told HR I had a conflict of interest or a stomach virus or a moral breakdown. But instead, I stayed. Because part of me, the broken, petty, still sore part of me, wanted to see her face when she saw mine. So I watched the clock tick closer to 11 a.m. I took a breath, and then the door opened, and there she was. Same eyes, same calm little smile, same air of the world owes me something, and it's probably your dignity. She didn't look surprised, because she hadn't looked at me yet, until she sat down, adjusted her blazer, and I said, "Welcome, Ms. Reese. Please, walk me through your last few years." That's when her face changed. Just slightly. Just enough. And I swear to you, the silence that followed was the best sound I've ever heard. The first thing she did wasn't speak. She blinked, just once, but the way her body stiffened gave her away. Her fingers froze on her lap, like she was trying to decide whether to stand up and run or pretend this was all some freak coincidence. I waited. The rest of the interview panel stayed blissfully unaware. My assistant, Trey, glanced down at her resume like it was just another applicant in the pile. Only I knew this wasn't an applicant. This was the woman who had once told me, and I quote, "You're the kind of man who's born to be average." And now she was sitting in front of me, looking very not average in a navy blazer, clutching a recycled resume like it held her last shred of pride. "I'm happy to be here," she said finally, and I had to grip the edge of the table because that voice still carried the same polished poison it always had. She knew how to act composed when everything was falling apart. I'd seen her do it before, at parties, in arguments, even when she left. And now, apparently, during job interviews too. I decided to play it straight. I didn't smirk. I didn't flinch. I nodded once and said, "Let's begin then." My voice didn't even shake. And maybe that's what scared me most. That I could sit across from her like she hadn't shattered my self-worth half a decade ago. Like I hadn't spent nights curled up in my old Honda Civic wondering what made me so disposable. Trey asked her about logistics software experience. She lied. I knew she lied because I used to stay up late helping her write fake experience for online certification tests she never took seriously. She smiled and said, "I led several mid-scale warehouse initiatives," which was rich, considering she once confused skew with some kind of yogurt. But I let her talk. I let her spin whatever narrative she'd rehearsed in front of the mirror that morning. Because the deeper she dug into her story, the clearer it became. She had no idea I was in charge of final decisions. Not yet. When it was my turn, I leaned forward and asked, "You have a 5-year gap on your resume. What were you doing during that time?" I knew exactly what she'd been doing. Traveling with that guy she left me for. Selling handmade jewelry out of a van. Posting pseudo-philosophical captions on social media like "freedom has a taste the weak can't swallow." I knew, because I used to check her Instagram when I was at my lowest. Until I stopped. Until I decided she was just another closed tab in the browser of my life. She hesitated. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I was Taking time to find direction, she said finally, and I almost laughed out loud. She used to call people like that lazy. Finding direction was something she mocked, until the mirror turned on her. I nodded again, making a small note on the paper in front of me. I didn't need to, but the sound of my pen scratching the surface made her visibly twitch. That gave me life. For once, I wasn't the one unraveling. Then came the part one hadn't expected. She turned slightly toward me, her voice softening. "You look familiar," she said, with that fake curiosity she used on waiters and Uber drivers. "Have we met before?" The room went silent. Trey looked up. So did the HR girl. I met Ember's eyes, and I smiled. "No," I said calmly. "But I never forget a resume written in Helvetica bold." She blinked again, and I swear, right then, I saw the realization crack through her like lightning. The look on her face was almost comical, like her brain had just caught up to what her eyes had refused to believe. That little twitch in her jaw? I remembered it from our fights. It was the physical equivalent of a system crash. I thought she'd bolt. Honestly, I was half hoping she would. Just grab her pleather purse and storm out with whatever pride she had left. But no, Ember didn't leave. She adjusted, like always. "Oh," she said finally, eyes narrowing like she was mentally flipping through old photo albums trying to decide if I was someone she'd dated or fired. "You're Gordon. Gordon Hale." Bingo. There it was. My full name, dragged out like a hair in her soup. "Yes," I said, still calm, still composed. "But you can call me Mr. Hale. Everyone else here does." Trey chuckled under his breath. He didn't know the history, obviously. To him, this was just a confident hiring manager keeping things formal. But Ember knew. That little jab hit her like a slow bruise. Didn't show up immediately, but I could see it forming. She smiled, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of smile people give when they're bleeding internally and need to buy time. "It's good to see you doing well," she said, and I swear her voice trembled on the word well. I didn't respond. I just looked down at her resume again, as if I hadn't already memorized every bullet point out of disbelief. Then she did something I didn't see coming. She leaned forward, ever so slightly, and said, "Look, Gordon, I know this might be awkward. I had no idea you worked here, honestly. But I really need this opportunity." There it was. Not apology. Not regret. Need. It hit me differently than I expected. I thought I'd feel victorious. Vindicated. But instead, there was this tight knot in my chest, like watching someone who used to be untouchable suddenly beg for air. And I hated myself for feeling anything but satisfaction. "What changed?" I asked. The words came out colder than I intended. "5 years ago, you said you'd never work a boring corporate job run by cowards and yes-men." She winced. I knew she remembered saying that. It was during our last dinner together, before she left. I'd made the mistake of bringing up a potential promotion. She'd mocked it like I told her I wanted to be a mall cop. "I was wrong," she said, voice softer now. "I've learned a few things." I bet she had. Like how the guy she ran off with didn't actually own the house he bragged about. Or how selling candles out of a food truck wasn't a scalable business model. Or how burning every bridge eventually leaves you stranded. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I leaned back, folded my hands, and said, "Tell me why I should even consider hiring you." And the way her mouth opened, then closed again, was the first honest moment I'd seen from her in years. She looked down. Her fingers trembled just a bit. "Because I'm not who I was," she whispered. "And because no one else will even give me the chance to prove that." For a second, a very small second, I almost felt something close to sympathy. But then I remembered the voicemail she left me the day after she moved out. The one where she laughed with someone in the background, calling me Gordon the safety net. And the sympathy? It died on arrival. Still, I kept my face blank. I nodded slowly. "We'll be in touch," I said. And then I stood. The interview was over. But the game had just begun. She didn't leave the building right away. I watched through the sliver of glass in my office door as she stood by the elevators, staring at her phone like she was expecting a miracle to call her. Then she turned and walked toward the lobby exit, stiff and deliberate, like she had to force each step not to look like defeat. I should have felt triumphant. I should have grinned and blasted a victory playlist in my car on the way home. But instead, I just sat there, replaying the way she said, "No one else will even give me the chance." An hour later, Trey knocked gently and handed me a sticky note. Weird situation," he said. Someone left this for you downstairs. I looked down at the note. In rushed, familiar handwriting. 5 minutes of your time. No panel. Just you. One chance. Below that was a time. 5:45 p.m. I stared at it like it was a ghost. A ghost that knew how to guilt trip me. And then I made the first mistake. I didn't throw it out. I didn't ignore it. I told myself I'd stop by the downstairs break area after hours, just to hear her out. Not to forgive. Not to entertain hiring her. Just to confirm that I was right about who she still was. The elevator ride down was suffocating. Empty, quiet, like it knew I was walking into something I'd regret. And there she was, sitting at one of the plastic cafe tables with 2 vending machine coffees, and that same unreadable look she used to give me when she was trying to manipulate a conversation before it even started. "You came," she said, like she wasn't surprised. That pissed me off more than anything. I stayed standing. "Make it quick." She slid a manila folder across the table. "This is the real resume," she said. "I cleaned houses for 2 years. Waitressed in a dive bar in Nevada. Slept in my car for 3 weeks last winter when the guy I was with dumped me at a gas station in Kansas. I didn't put it on the version I gave your team because pride or shame. Honestly, both. I didn't reach for the folder. I didn't even blink. And I asked, why do I need to know this now?" Her voice dropped low. "Because I have a son." That sentence hit like a car crash in a snowstorm. Out of nowhere, slow motion, and loud in your ears for minutes after impact. I felt my heart thud once hard. She kept going. "He's 4. His name's Ezra. And before you ask, he's not yours. I did a paternity test. It was the other guy's. The one who left. But I'm telling you this because I'm not just looking for a job. I'm begging for stability." I couldn't even sit. My knees wanted to buckle, but my brain refused to give her that image. "You walked out on me with no warning," I said, my voice cracking like dry glass. "And now you think a tragic backstory earns you a second shot?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "I think honesty might." Finally. It was the first time she looked human. Not polished, not rehearsed, not manipulative. Just exhausted. And I hated her for making me feel torn. Because I should have walked out right then. I should have told her that I was done with every thread of the old life she thought she could pull on. But instead, I stood there, blinking, hands shaking at my sides, wondering how it was possible to feel angry and protective and betrayed and sorry all at once. Then she added one more sentence, so quiet I almost missed it. "I didn't come here to use you. I came because I didn't know where else to go." And that's when I realized she had nothing left to lose. And I had everything. By the next morning, I nearly convinced myself that I could file the whole thing away in the archives of weird personal history. Let it die there. I didn't tell anyone about our after-hours conversation. I didn't mention the kid. I didn't bring up the fact that she had handed me a completely different resume, or that she had asked for nothing but a sliver of dignity. I thought, maybe stupidly, that the chapter had closed. But by 11 a.m., I found out I was wrong. Very wrong. My department's internal HR rep, Alyssa, stopped by my office. "Gordon," she said with a tight, unreadable smile. "Can I talk to you for a second? In private?" She sat down with a folder already open. "We received a report this morning from a candidate who says she was treated inappropriately during an interview. She claimed there was a personal relationship that should have disqualified the manager from participating." My stomach went cold. I didn't have to ask who filed it. "She didn't name you directly," Alyssa added, watching me closely. "But the timeline, the details, the initials on the schedule, it's obviously referring to you. Gordon, did you disclose any previous connection to Ms. Emmeline Reese?" I wanted to scream, or laugh, or throw something. After everything, after she had begged me for help, poured her messy truth into a coffee-stained confession, and claimed she wanted to be honest, she went straight to HR and made me look like I had crossed a line. I cleared my throat and forced my voice to stay level. We were married. Years ago. Briefly. I didn't know she'd applied until her resume crossed my desk. I didn't hide anything. I just didn't see the need to bring up a failed marriage during an initial interview. Alyssa stared at me. Not angry. Not skeptical. But cautious. "You should have recused yourself. That's the rule." "I know," I said, heat building behind my eyes. But I didn't expect her to turn it into an accusation. "She didn't accuse you of misconduct," she said. "Just conflict of interest. Still, we have to pause the hiring process and note it in your file." My file. Just like that, a red mark. Because of her. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus. I kept picturing her walking out of that break room last night, calm, composed, planning it all. Was that her angle the entire time? Get me alone, make me listen, trigger some guilt, and then set up a complaint so I looked compromised? But no, that didn't track. Because if she wanted to manipulate me, why tell me about the real resume? Why admit to the kid? Why offer up any truth at all? Unless she knew I wouldn't help her, and the report was her backup plan. Insurance. A grenade, just in case. I left the office late, my mind spinning, my jaw locked so tight it hurt. But just as I reached the parking lot, I saw something that made my blood boil. Ember, standing outside. Again, not crying, not angry, just waiting. She spotted me, walked up slowly, and said, "You talk to HR." I couldn't even speak. She held up her hands like I was a wild animal. I didn't lie. I just covered myself. In case you were going to retaliate. Retaliate, I hissed. You walk into my interview room, my company, ask for help, then immediately file a report on me? You didn't say you wouldn't help, she said quietly. You just said nothing, and I've learned not to trust silence. I laughed bitterly. You've learned nothing, Emmeline. You left silence on a fridge door 5 years ago and called it closure. She didn't flinch. She just stood there, hugging her coat around herself like she was freezing inside and out. Then she said the last thing I expected. I didn't come back to ruin your life, Gordon. I came back because mine's already ruined. And you were the last person who ever looked at me like I could be more than what I became. And then, without waiting for my response, she turned and walked into the night, leaving me stunned and furious, standing alone in the dark. I was still turning the whole thing over in my head when my office line rang the next morning. Not my cell, my direct desk line. That phone rarely rings. Only clients or senior partners ever use it. Gordon Hale, I answered, already bracing for another HR follow-up or some corporate apology memo from legal. But the voice that came through wasn't from the company. It was deep, controlled. Male, is this Gordon Hale? You interviewed Emmeline Reese yesterday. I didn't respond right away. Something about the tone. It wasn't confrontational, but it wasn't casual either. Who's this? I asked, sitting up straighter. I'm her brother, the man said. Name's Cooper. I blinked. Ember never talked much about her family. I knew she had a brother, but I'd never met him. Supposedly, they had a falling out years before we even got married. I'm calling, he continued, because she told me everything that happened, and I figured you deserve the full picture. She won't say it herself. She's too proud, but you need to know something. I was caught off guard. Know what? There was a pause on the other end, like he was debating how much to reveal. She's been sick, he said finally. For real. Not the kind of sick you can Instagram your way out of. Depression. Severe. She hid it for years. You probably saw the surface, the coldness, the distance, but not the collapse. I didn't either. Not until she hit bottom. I didn't know what to say. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, completely still. She's trying, Cooper said. I'm not calling to beg you to hire her. I'm just telling you. If you ever gave a damn about her, even a little, don't let your anger erase the fact that she's still trying to survive. Then he hung up. No goodbye, no plea. Just truth, dumped on my desk like a brick through a window. And for the first time since that interview, I wasn't sure if this was still about revenge anymore. Maybe it never was. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her brother's face in my head, even though I had no idea what he looked like. It was just the weight of his words that kept echoing. She's trying to survive. Trying. That word messed me up. I hated how it cracked through my carefully built wall of resentment. I'd spent 5 years learning how not to feel anything toward her, and now, somehow, I was staring at my ceiling, wondering if I was the villain in a chapter she'd already rewritten in pain. By morning, I had convinced myself to let it go. Again, no more drama. No more late-night meetings. Just push her file to HR and let the system do its job. But as I walked into my office, a large yellow envelope was sitting on my chair. No name on the outside. No sender listed. Just my name handwritten in block letters. Gordon. I looked around. No one saw who left it. No security footage that would tell me if she had come back again. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a single piece of paper, no cover letter, nothing fancy. Just one scanned photograph, black and white, grainy, dated from 2 years ago. It was of her and a child. A little boy, no more than 2. They were sitting on the ground near some rundown building, bundled in coats, and eating fast food from a brown bag. She wasn't posing. She wasn't smiling. She looked exhausted, like life had dropped her there and walked away. But the boy? He was beaming, holding a half-eaten French fry like it was a trophy, his other hand gripping her coat tightly. On the back, she had written one sentence in pen. I failed you, but I won't fail him. That was the moment something inside me cracked wide open. I couldn't explain what I felt. It wasn't pity. It wasn't love. It wasn't the old heartbreak crawling back. It was something messier. Anger still, but also guilt. And a weird sort of respect for how hard she'd clearly fallen and the fact that she was still standing. I didn't know her anything. I kept telling myself that. But the more I stared at that photo, the more I realized that maybe I wasn't doing this for her anymore. Maybe I was doing it for me. To stop carrying the weight of a woman I once loved as a burden I couldn't forgive. At 2 p.m., I walked into the hiring committee's meeting with her folder in hand. The other 2 department leads were already flipping through their notes. Her name was still on the list of pending decisions. Trey looked up from his laptop and asked casually, Reese, what are we thinking? Drop or move forward? I could have said no. I could have ended it right there, sealed the box, and walked away with the same bitterness I'd worn like armor for years. But I didn't. Move forward, I said. There was a brief pause in the room, a shuffle of surprise. You sure? Trey asked. She was a little scattered. Yeah, I replied, taking a seat. But something tells me she's done pretending. That's rare. We could use that kind of real. And just like that, I handed the pain over to something new. Not closure, not redemption, but maybe, just maybe, a beginning. Her first day was quiet. She arrived early, wore a plain gray blouse. No makeup, no blazer this time, no mask. She didn't try to impress anyone. She just took the empty desk in the far corner and started sorting paperwork without making a sound. No announcement, no drama, no eye contact with me. I watched from behind my office window, pretending to read emails. But I wasn't reading anything. I was waiting. For a glance. A wave. A nod. Something. But she didn't look my way. Not once. I should have been relieved. That's what I told myself. This was the boundary I wanted. Professional distance. Clean lines. A fresh start for her, and a clean break for me. That's what it was supposed to be. But 3 days in, something changed. It was a Friday. Late afternoon. Office half empty already. I was heading to the elevator when I saw her in the break room, standing awkwardly near the vending machine, staring at the options like none of them made sense. I paused, told myself to keep walking. Then she spoke, without turning. You still drink that awful instant coffee? I exhaled through my nose. Every morning. She finally looked at me, just for a second. Some things never change. And just like that, the weight dropped a little. We didn't talk long. 5 minutes, maybe. Small things. Weather. Budget reports. The weird humming sound near the stairwell. But it felt human. Light. It was the first time we'd been in a room together without old pain hanging between us like smoke. Over the next few weeks, something settled between us. Not forgiveness. Not friendship. But something gentler than either. Respect, maybe. Or understanding. I watched her slowly gain footing again. She worked hard, stayed late, didn't complain. Her voice got stronger in meetings. She even made a few people laugh during one of the project briefings. And every so often, I'd find another sticky note on my desk. No name, no explanation. Just small messages. Thank you for not closing the door. He loves puzzles now. Ezra. I'm not proud of who I was, but I'm proud of who I'm trying to be. I never wrote back. I didn't need to. We weren't trying to go back. That wasn't the point. The point was that somehow, against all odds, we'd met again not to reopen wounds, but to prove that healing was possible, even if it came late. Even if it looked nothing like the life we thought we'd have. She was never mine to fix, and I was never hers to break. Maybe that's what we had to learn the hard way. But now, every time I pass her desk and see her typing quietly, focused, steady, I remember the man I was, and the woman she became. And for the first time in years, I'm okay with both.